Hello, folks. Mayo Best here with the Blitz Business Development Show. And I am super excited today, folks, because not only is it the holidays, but we're coming back to conclude our last and final episode of our three-part series on advertising. Now, we've been touching on the different ways to advertise. Last week, we talked about TV. Want to find out what we're going to talk about this week to conclude this three-part series? Come right back to us in just a few moments, just after we pay a few bills. Hello and welcome to the Blitz Business Development Show. My name is Mayo Best and I'm a business consultant and coach as well as the founder of the Blitz Business Development Academy. This is the show that provides guidance, resources, and access to best practices to help you advertise, manage, and build geometric profits. From freelancers and home-based business owners to startups and storefronts, you will learn how to start small as you think and grow big. The Blitz Local Deals Club is a free membership-based app and service that offers consumers the ability to find the best deals, coupons, and savings available in their neighborhoods. This exclusive free membership connects you to the best offers from local pizza and sandwich shops, bars, restaurants, stores, and service-based businesses. Members will even gain access to rewards and loyalty programs, making this the ultimate money savings app on the planet. And the best part is, not only can consumers take advantage of the best deals and discounts, but also help support their local businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is all made possible at the click of a button. So, become a free member and get access to your local deals today. All right, folks, we are back and we have a phenomenal show in store for you today. Today, we're going to conclude our three-part series with podcasting, internet radio, going on shows as a guest, as a form of advertising. Folks, I'm going to go a little deep today because I'm going to pull back the veil, all right? I oftentimes don't share my playbook and share a lot of my secrets, but I'm going to share them with you because I really want you guys to understand some very, very valuable things. As you guys may already know, I have an entertainment background that spans over 25 years. And one of the things that's been very, very, very useful to learn is that whenever you're trying to sell yourself, there are certain things that you can do that you can highly leverage, right? In terms of, getting folks to want to purchase from you. Now, I'm going to show you guys some of the secrets behind the veil of not just what I do, but what a lot of folks are doing who have figured this out. Now, I have a little bit of an edge to a degree, just simply because I used to have an entertainment background and I've done a lot of stuff on TV and I've done some film and so forth. So it was actually a part of my career. And these things you learn in broadcasting school and you learn these things from being an actor and so forth. However, what I'm going to show you guys is the business reasons as to why you want to do, not necessarily meaning you have to create your own podcast, but to be on a podcast. In fact, to be honest with you, there's a lot of work in doing these podcasts and preparing these shows, and it's extremely time consuming. However, it's a great thing to do if you've got the time and you can make it work, but you don't have to create your own podcast to get some huge benefits from being on other people's podcasts, okay? Now I'm going to jump into what those things actually are. And of course, just like we did last time, I'm going to back that up with a few statistics as well. But first, let's go into number one. So number one, folks, is the audience's psychology beneath the perception of the guest. Now, I'm going to help you understand, and as I'm explaining this to you, I want you to even think about yourself, okay? The reason why being on a podcast or being on a TV show or being a guest on a show that has some type of credibility in and of itself is based off of how we actually respond as humans psychologically and how we basically position people to be in positions of authority, and we give them credibility when they are associated with things that are already credible. And by the way, this does not just apply to podcasts or to being on TV or on radio. This also applies if you're speaking in a room and say doing a presentation, and somebody pretty much edifies you and introduce you. And remember, before they introduce you, they give your background, they give your resume. And what this does is this educates the audience as to why they should, one, listen to you. Why should they listen to you, right? Okay, well, maybe because you have a PhD, or maybe you don't. Maybe you've got 30 years experience, even better in my opinion, okay? Or maybe because you have some type of certificate, or if you created something that was game changing, or you've gotten phenomenal results. See, people like to get their credibility or build their credibility through other people. So if someone takes the time to put you on their show, then the thinking that most people have is that you must be on some level somewhat credible, or possibly the authority figure, based off of what they're being told, but also based off of how you're being edified by another person. Now, this is huge because a lot of folks will not buy from you until they trust you first. They don't even necessarily have to like you. Okay? There are some cases people will buy and they can disassociate themselves emotionally from what they feel like they need to do because you've got a hell of a product, right? Well, of course, ideally, you want them to like you too. That just makes it a lot easier. But what you must have is trust. People need to trust you. If they don't trust you, then they will not buy from you. They will not be interested in your brand if they think you're a jerk, or if they think that you're coming across as slimy. And people can tell, they listen to you. None of us were born yesterday. So at the end of the day, this is why it is so powerful to get yourself on a show. It's not just the exposure. I would say that's what most people think, is that, I'm going to get on a show to get some exposure. And yes, that is absolutely true. It is a component. But that should not really so much be your goal as much as it is to build trust with that audience and give them a reason. Okay, give people a reason to actually trust you, not just because you've got the credentials, not just because you've got the experience, but because you are able to basically exude and translate that passion and convey that to them through your messaging and how you position yourself, your experiences, all of your clients around that situation, around what it is that you do. This is huge, guys. And I'm telling you right now, you will gain so much distance by doing this and doing this well. Okay. Now, of course, on my podcast, so far from what you guys seen, I haven't had any guests at all in this first season. And that's on purpose. I'm actually right now preparing for my second season. And in the second season, we will have guests. And the reason why I'm doing that in this first season is I just want this to be you and I. Okay. And I just want to really help those folks in particular who are just getting started, and those that could probably use some of this information that maybe even a little bit further along. And that's the purpose for me starting off this way. Our first 12 episodes will just be you and I. You guys get to know me, get to understand, the value that I'm looking to bring to you. All right. And that's going to continue definitely into our second season and beyond. But with that said, folks, it's very important that you understand this as a strategy if you're going to be on other folks' podcasts. And you should, by the way, absolutely. In fact, we're going to put a link in the show notes today. If you're interested in being on this show, by all means, guys, I want you to click on the link and we can sit and talk and see if you're a good fit for the show and what we're going to be doing moving forward. So you guys are definitely invited as audience members. I love to have you on the show and I love to work with you. But with that said, let's move on. So number 2, Position yourself as an authority, which really dovetails really well with the first one in the respect that, when you are an authority in your area, okay, and the way that you have to do this, of course, is a lot of what I've already said, but when you position yourself as an authority, you just make it that much more easier for people to follow, listen, and eventually buy from you or invest into your services. So to do that, I'm not saying that a podcast or working on somebody's radio show or, being a guest on some other type of platform will not help. In fact, you honestly want to do as many things as you can to position yourself as an authority in your marketplace. But today we're going to focus, of course, on podcasts, essentially. Now, let's move on to number 3. People get to place a person to connect and relate to as opposed to a brand. So it's very important that you guys humanize your businesses. There's a lot of talk about branding. There's a lot of talk about making sure that you expose your business and all those things. But I'm telling you right now, given the climate that we are in terms of a lot of the things that people are going through, a lot of the expense that is being driven up by the inflation and so forth, people are going to be a lot more, I would say, sensitive as to how they're spending their money, especially how they invest their money and who they invest their money with. So let me let you in on a little secret here. This is just a bonus fact here. This is not the time to be transactional. Okay? If you guys don't know what I mean, let me explain that. To be transactional is just to be basically like someone who's just there to sell that product or service, nothing more, nothing less. That's it. Right now is a good time to build relationships. You want to have a relational approach to what you're doing. Even if you're in a product-based business, you need to find some way to connect to those customers. Now, I'm never going to not say this, okay? And the reason why is because that emotional connection will help you gain so much value and give you dividends in return with your customer base. And that's not just value in the sense of emotional perception. That's also value in the sense of dollars and cents. Your LTV or your lifetime value of a customer is extremely important to your bottom line. And being a real person and getting your brand extended, or I should say, in illuminating the humanity in your company is a good way to get people to not only like you, to maybe possibly trust you, but to also get a relationship built or get one started at least. So these are very, very huge benefits to doing these things. And I personally highly recommend that you do, because definitely you've got nothing to lose by making sure that you take care of your customers in that way. So let's move on, folks, to number 4. The audience can download the podcast. And folks, that's actually pretty huge. You have to think about this. The audiences that you're going to basically be dealing with in the beginning, if you have your own podcast, it may not be that many. Okay, this is a new show. We don't have so many downloads, but eventually as your show grows, the benefit in you being a guest on a podcast, okay, for a show is that you're going to be able to capitalize on that pretty much in perpetuity. I mean, once you are actually in a show as a guest, that episode is going to stay there. Let me give you an example why this is huge. So let's say you are a guest on the show. It was a great show. Some great things were said about you and your company. Well, not only can you take that episode and put it on your website, but just think about it. As new people get exposed to that person's show that you were on, all of those downloads still are going to have you in it. So just think about the return on investment that you're getting from being on that show over time that you aren't even going to be necessarily paying for at that point. Okay, because over and over again, as you're getting downloads, people are literally seeing you over and over again. And you've only had to spend that time once. That's tremendous leverage. Now, let's say that show is syndicated. Okay, like take for instance my show. My show is syndicated of about 10 different platforms, right? However, as we move into our second season, right now we are also on YouTube, which is why we do a video recording for those that are listening to the podcast. We actually have a YouTube channel as well where you can actually watch the show and write down the notes that we give on the side of the screen. You can actually just write those down and watch the show as well. But coming around our second season or so, we're going to start syndicating the show on video. So just think about that, folks. You could actually, with some podcasts, not just mine, you could actually do one show and be recorded in 15 to 20 different places where people are going to get that exposure. That is huge. And the funny thing is, a lot of people don't really talk about that. The exposure goes way beyond just a podcast, especially for those like myself who are doing sort of dual purpose content, to where we actually take the show and we put one episode, or I should say the same episode, on YouTube that we actually will put, into Red Circle, which is basically our podcast, distributor that distributes our podcast to multiple different platforms. So you'll be on Spotify, you may be on Apple, you may be on Radio Talk or iHeart. So there's a whole bunch of different platforms that you guys can get on just by getting on a show. This is why, of course, there are a lot of podcasters that are a little picky about who they put on their show, because they're worried about the quality of, their show. And they want to make sure that people who know what they're doing, know what they're talking about, are on their show. And actually, so do I. But that doesn't mean don't apply. That doesn't mean don't reach out, because you may very well be possibly just exactly what we're looking for that particular episode. But so by all means, click on the button below and hey, try your hand, as my wife says to me. So with that said, folks, the fact that people can download those podcasts is huge. All right. And here's another thing. Just because people may not download a podcast doesn't mean that they don't listen to the podcast. And it doesn't mean that you didn't just get exposure. So that's just an extra bonus. Okay. So yes, as a way of advertising, guys, I'm going to encourage you to not only try to get on this show, but try to get on other podcasts. And listen, don't just go for the big podcasts too, because there are a lot of smaller podcasts out here where you guys can really bring some high value to and spread your name. All right. So that's huge in terms of the podcast download, but yet another reason why you want to do these things strategically. Now, I want to get into some of the statistics surrounding our podcast and say that, number one, something special about podcast listeners is that they're loyal. All right. Often, listeners build attachments to shows and hosts like they would TV series. Folks, that's true. And think about yourself. Have you not done that before with somebody or a personality that you really like, or someplace or someone who you really got a lot of value from? You keep coming back to those same people for value. It's what I'm trying to do. I'm hopefully trying to bring as much value and content that I can to you guys that you guys can use that are executable takeaways. I mean, that's honestly the core values of this show. This is why I actually have a list of things and give you guys takeaways every single show. Right? So, whether or not it's me or someone else's personality that you really like, just think about it. That's exactly why people are going back to those shows and downloading those episodes, because they're loving and falling in love with those hosts and those personalities. So that's another key thing to really take in consideration. Also, 75% of the U.S. population is familiar with the term podcasting, up from since 2019. Podcasts are growing at a phenomenal rate. There was a time where, people didn't really talk about podcasts as much as they are now, but as a result of the pandemic causing for us to be in our homes for so long, we have definitely started to make some adaptations, and people have more time. Okay. Because they have more time, they're able to listen longer, right? And so that just benefits you, because it also means they're a lot more attentive. And a lot of folks are consuming their podcast while they're driving, which is actually a good time, because you've got nothing else to do but zone out and listen to that podcast, download it, and listen to it again if there was something on that podcast of substance that you wanted to listen to and learn from. All right. So that's another huge reason. So 37%, which is 104 million, listened to a podcast in the last month. And that's up from 32% from before. Now, 104 million folks, 37%. Those numbers are still growing, by the way. 24% or 68 million folks listen to podcasts weekly, up from 22% since 2019. So folks, you got a very dedicated and loyal following of folks who listen to podcasts, which is actually quite cool, because if you think about it, they're saying now that we have the attention span of a goldfish, which means for watching like YouTube videos and things like that, you got to work 100 times harder to keep people's attention. However, for some reason, when it comes to podcasts, people are really, really listening for much longer. And, I never would have thought that, but it actually kind of makes sense, because, video on one hand is phenomenal because it's a multi-sensory form of communication. At the same time, I guess because we have so many other distractions like commercials and life that's going along with that, that's pretty much bombarding our senses and pulling that attention away from us, that I could see why, when you've whittled things down to one sense, which is just listening, why people maybe listen longer. Okay, there's not as much distraction, that's pretty much jumping in there and taking you away from the message that you're listening to. Okay, number 8. 24% or 68 million people listen to podcasts weekly. Folks, and that number, again, is still growing. So yet another reason to basically cash in, guys, on becoming a guest on someone's podcast, because you're getting an audience who returns. That's huge. That's an enormous opportunity for you guys to not only get that exposure, but like I said before, build that trust. So imagine if you're doing that with different audiences and you're going from one podcast to the next. I would say, folks, if I were you and I was a business owner, I would be trying to get on at least 1 to 2 podcasts a month at minimum. If you could do once a week, that would be even better. And you probably can definitely do that, because there are literally millions of podcasts at this point. All right. So let's move on. Number 9, which is the people who listen to podcasts tend to be passionate and have an attachment to what they listen to. The opportunity for brand awareness is tremendous. So, folks, like I said before, they're not just loyal, they're also passionate. People really care about the podcast that they select and choose, and they're coming back over and over again. So imagine, folks, if you're able to run a commercial on a podcast that you love, and your audience loves that podcast, and now they're not just an audience, they're your target market. Just think about it. You get an enormous amount of exposures to the same people, which is what you're looking for, and that is huge. Okay, coming up for number 10 now. People who aren't paying for cable anymore are paying more for ad-free subscription services like Spotify, just to escape the barrage of unwanted advertisements. So folks, you got people who are looking to cut the cord and have cut the cord and gotten rid of other services because they're just so tired of paying for, commercials, that they want something that's more content concentrated, for lack of a better term. And so they are basically chiming in and paying, in some case, for services like Spotify to get access to the podcast. And sometimes they're actually paying a little bit more just to get less advertising. That's huge. So that's pretty much it, folks. That's all 10 of the reasons that we have that you should really consider in terms of getting on a podcast, being a guest. We've covered quite a bit today in terms of your strategy and the psychology and so forth. But I really do want to say that I think that podcasts moving forward are going to actually grow. And here's the thing about this pandemic. Folks, just when we think we're getting out of it or things are starting to kind of change or settle down, something changes again. A whole new variant comes out. At the time that we're recording this show, Omicron is the dominant variant. And we don't know where this is going, but what I can tell you is I honestly don't see a time anytime soon where people are not going to be having to still do sometimes some lockdowns, or even if it's not an official lockdown, people are going to be spending more time to themselves and at home, especially if things pick up and get worse. They won't have to be told to stay home. And I'm not saying everyone. There, of course, going to be a lot of folks that's going to be out there. But my point is that this is a great time to be a guest on someone's show. If you have the time, if you've got the dedication, if you've got the passion to do your own podcast, there's some phenomenal, I think, benefits to doing one. But it is a commitment and you want to be ready for it, because I can tell you now, it can be difficult getting these shows out every week, guys, in the midst of still having a regular full-fledged business. But if you can do that, starting your own podcast is a great thing to do. I would say in the beginning, be guests, be a guest a couple times on other people's show. With that said, folks, I want to introduce something that we're doing that I'm debuting now. It's called Build an Audience. Folks, let's face it, the reason why you normally get on these shows or try to come onto a podcast is because you're trying to get exposure. But with our new Build an Audience concept, which I think is actually a game changer, we're actually giving you the ability to build your own audience. And by build your own audience, what I mean is, what if you could basically put the person that is the demographic or reflective of the avatar, the customer avatar that you're target marketing, what if you can actually put butts in the seats of just those people? So what does that do to your chances of converting those folks to a sale? Well, they're going to increase, right? Because these are the people who you already target. Well, we've come up with a very unique concept that allows you to do that. I'm not going to go into it here, but if you'd like to know more about it, you can definitely hit me up in email and contact me, and we can talk about it and talk about you possibly even being on the show. With that said, folks, thank you so much. Have a happy holiday, whatever you celebrate. Take care of yourselves, guys. Be safe. Until next week when we return with the Blitz Business Development Show. Take care. God bless. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.